Welcome to Manitou Springs Cliff Dwellings. This opened in 1907 using stones from Mesa Top and Cliff Dwellings that were relocated here to represent and preserve the finest architecture of the ancient Puebloans, formerly known as the Anasazi. But is this really a faithful representation of ancient Puebloan life, or just an early 20th century tourist attraction? And regardless of how it started, is it worth visiting today? We're going to compare it to Keat Seal in Navajo National Monument. Now, Manitou Springs is just outside Colorado Springs at the base of Pikes Peak. By 1900, it was becoming a well-known tourist attraction with commercial photography at the Garden of the Gods, and soon the construction of the world-famous Broadmoor Hotel. In 1888, a ranching family by the name of Wetherill was chasing stray cattle and discovered the cliff dwellings at what is now known as Mesa Verde. And they collected pottery and other artifacts that were just lying left there and sold them to East Coast institutions and others. They were prominently displayed at the Columbian Exposition in 1893 in Chicago, and the great race was on to discover and collect as much artifacts as they could find. It was in this backdrop that efforts to both preserve as well as take advantage of the tourist opportunities came together, and in my opinion, that seems to be the genesis of the Manitou Cliff Dwelling development. All right, so let's take a look so that you can see where we are. Here's a map of the Four Corners area with the appropriate states: Denver top right, Manitou Springs below that, and in orange is the ancestral Puebloan Range with Mesa Verde National Park right there. And just above that is where the ruins were found and relocated over 225 miles to Manitou Springs. And as you can see, that is well outside the native range of ancient Puebloans. But that's okay. One thing that I can't tell you is how faithfully they reproduced what they removed and transplanted here, because I did not see any photographs or drawings of the in situ dwellings where they found them. But hey, this is a wonderful place. They encouraged you to walk through. They have about 40 rooms here, including a kiva. And it does a pretty good job representing what the cliff dwellings look like between the period of 1150 and 1300 AD, which was a fraction of the ancient Puebloan culture that lasted from about 200 AD to 1300 of the Common Era. We're going to come back here in just a few moments, but first I want to take you over to Keat Seal. It is a in-place ancient Puebloan ruins in the Navajo National Monument, and that is in northern Arizona. To get there, it is an 8.5-mile hike, beginning with a 1,000-foot vertical drop down into Sigi Canyon. And from there, you follow the canyon up. If it's summertime, you're going to find some quicksand there, so you got to be careful. And also, don't forget about rattlesnakes. It is a very strenuous hike, and very few people go there. But once you get there, you get this wonderful sight. Notice how tall the cliff face is. That is quite a bit taller than what you see at Manitou Springs. And it is also built up quite a bit higher. Now, Keat Seal, like most ancient Puebloan ruins, are actually built into the south-facing wall of these massive sandstone cliffs. What that does, it shades them from the summer heat, but it also lets the low light of the winter in a little bit. And these massive sandstone cliffs that they're in, they act like a wonderful heat sink, keeping it cooler in the summer naturally, and helping to preserve some of the warmth through the winter. Take a look at the ruins, though. They do look quite a bit like what you see at Manitou Springs. And quite frankly, even at Keat Seal, a lot of this was reconstructed, some of it during the 1930s and at other times. But let's head back to Manitou Cliff Dwellings and take a walk through there, because I am actually quite impressed here. As you've just seen from looking at Keat Seal, the architecture is very similar. The color of rocks are very similar. The big difference is that they used modern mortar to put the rocks together, and it is only because of that that they freely encourage you to walk through and enjoy the inside. Again, notice quite a bit of difference in the actual cliff that it's in. But other than that, it is a fairly faithful representation of ancient Puebloan cliff dwellings. The rocks aren't the same in the back, quite a bit different, but nonetheless, this is a good place to get the feel for it. It's not authentic. I don't know if this was built to the same design that it was removed from, or just they used those rocks and gave it a representative look. But either way, you really get the same feeling. And quite a few people are not going to be walking to Keat Seal as I did about 20 years ago. Here's one of the first places that I've seen a kiva. Normally the kiva would have a top on it because it was a closed area, but this lets you look down and see how a kiva was organized. Now, for all I've said about the cliff dwellings here, I am a huge fan. And partly because they do a great job explaining what you're looking at. There are signs everywhere explaining the rooms that you're going into, the types of rooms that you have, and they do just a wonderful job with that. Now, the other thing is, as I've said before, very few people are going to walk to Keat Seal, and that's good. It should be left as it is for those willing to make the trek under the guidance of National Park Service ranger. My wife and I were both very impressed by the fact that they planted what would have been natural vegetation in the ancestral Puebloan homeland, but they identified it, and then they had just wonderful signs there describing what it is and what the usefulness of the specific plants were for. We love that. And it's for reasons like that that I highly recommend the Manitou Springs Cliff Dwellings. They just do a really good job putting all of this in context. Just know that it is not a true Anasazi ruin. It is a representation of one, and they have done a fantastic job. Now here's a recreation of a clifftop dwelling that they've identified. Again, there's no way to know if this is an actual recreation of one that they took apart and moved over here or not. But you do get a sense there. Notice that door right there. It's got the old ancient Puebloan wider at the top than the bottom. And here we have some metates where they ground their corn. Again, more signs. The one-seed juniper and the ponderosa pine. Now let's go in here. This is a representation of a Pueblo style that you'll see down in Santa Fe, and you can see that it does a pretty good job from my Santa Fe video. Let's go inside. They have a wonderful gift shop, and it is very large, and they have many rooms for it. It is well stocked with things that you can buy, as you would expect. Both touristy type and some things that are just a little bit better. But as you keep walking through here, we're going to come to the reason that I also think this is an outstanding destination for anyone interested in the ancient Puebloan or just ancient American archaeology in general, and that is their museum. Follow the bear tracks back through one last portion, well, another portion of the gift shop, and head downstairs. And I really enjoy this museum. I have been to just about every museum I can see, anywhere from the Field Museum in Chicago, American History Museum in New York and D.C., Heard Museum in Arizona, Northern Arizona Museum. And one of the challenges is you can get brain numb really fast because they have so many examples of everything and they tend to just put a name on it. What this museum does, it has a good level of representational samples of everything, and they don't just give you a name and a date, they explain it very quickly, very simply, and I really appreciate it. That was an example of some of the early dwellings before they moved into the cliff dwellings. They have some artifacts, bows, arrows, atlatls, spear points. Again, just enough with enough explanation that you get a pretty good sense of what it was like living in those times, and how to use the yucca and the many purposes of it with representation samples of ancient artifacts that were found. So I'm really impressed with this. You don't come away with a data overload and your brain doesn't start going numb as it does in a more structured museum, if you will. So I'm a big fan. Notice the pots. There's good samples throughout all the periods, throughout all the areas, with signs and a little bit of an explanation. Enough to keep your interest without going into mental burn. So, yes, I am a huge fan of Manitou Springs Cliff Dwellings. I think it's important to put it in context of how it got there, but regardless of how it got there or why it got there, it is there now, and I am thankful for it. You see something similar happening around the world, like at the Lascaux Caves, protecting the ancient art that's there. They actually recreated the art in another cave for people to see. Some of these attractions are just being loved to death. So this is good. Hey, here's me back in the day when I was a photographer and quite a bit younger. Hey, hope you got something out of this. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. And as always, I am enjoying retirement.